All right, this may be where we have some conversation. 169, public participation at board meetings. Did I forget to bring that?
This one usually engenders considerable discussion and revision, and it depends. What do you do now, and is it working?
One of the
I think
things,
this is an opportunity to change it.
one of the things I would like to see us consider, and I did not write it out, but as I read this, I like the way it, and are there two versions? Am I looking?
No.
Okay, there's just one, okay. Because I like the fact that it's allowing us to set a limit of time for public input. Now, whether 30 minutes is the right amount of time or not can be discussed. And
The law permits you to do so.
yeah, but
Specifically.
what our policy does not presently allow us to do is to change the number of minutes each person is allowed. If we had 100 people in the room, could the chair decide to, like they do at the State Board of Education meetings, you know, we only have a certain amount of time, so everybody, instead of 3 minutes, they get 2 minutes or they get 1, and let the board have that, the board chair have the option to look at that and make that decision and announce it. You know, we have so many that we hope that you can do it in less time, but the way this is written, the board chair does not have that. And it could be that the board chair asks the members of the board, if there's no
Frankie.
objection, that.
Scroll
we
down,
would do
Frankie.
that.
Let me look at below. Frankie, scroll down.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I was just going to make a comment. Every school district I've seen that tried to put more limits on public discussions in Florida went through a really bad ordeal on it. So I think our way we've been doing it's worked fine. We've sit here a long time.
I know that there are school districts that have been specifically challenged on saying you may have 2 minutes to speak instead,
Yeah,
and they have been upheld.
They have been
They have
upheld.
been upheld.
No,
Yes.
but I'm just talking
They-
about on the political side of it.
Yes.
That's where I'm at, not the legal side.
Right,
There's
okay.
legal and there's political.
Yep.
And I tell you, I would not be in favor of limiting these speakers we have. I think they got a right to come here and talk, and we stay till they get done.
Would you like to speak, Mr. Slayton?
Think that anytime you have a group of people that are of like discussion, that they certainly can make their comments fit in whatever timeline the chairman gives them. Some people come here with a practiced 3-minute speech that rambles. I think the chair should have the right to say 3 or 2, or if it's ridiculous, 1.
I don't support that one.
Okay, but I do.
I saw a State Board of Education meeting where everybody was given 30 seconds.
30 seconds. I was on that call.
Yes, I have been at whenever
I think we were there.
we were there. Right, and there were so many people from one county that they got down to 30 seconds.
Well, I think it's a matter, Mr. Adams, I totally understand what you're saying. And that's why this is a year in progress. This is not something we're going to start tomorrow, so that it gives us time to help people understand. You, as well as all of us, have sat in legislative committee meetings where they have set how much time they're going to have for their meeting. And so at the end of that time, many people learn that they stand up and say, I support this, or I vote against. And if we can help our public understand, because no offense to anyone, but you know, we hear the same message sometimes over and over again, where if they were told that they had to be more to the point.
One of the things that I thought about a few days ago after Miss Ellen gave all this to us, I started thinking about exactly what I believe it says, is that there would be time prior to the meeting, and if you had a bunch of people show up, there would also be time at the end of the meeting for additional public speakers. And it's for the public forum, because there would also be, if you had an agenda item and the person says they want to speak to the agenda item, we certainly have to allow them to do so at that time. And because I have been around here a long time, I do remember when we had a lower amount of time that an individual was allowed. It wasn't 3 minutes at all times. And that same state board meeting where they did limit them to 30 seconds, I also remember other state board meetings, and I've seen other governmental entities do it, in particular here locally, where individuals, if they sign the form in the way that this policy would depict, they could say, I oppose, I'm a proponent, or I'm neutral, I think's the way this is written. And I believe our board chair would be able to say, okay, we've got 38 speakers signed up. As you know, our new time limit is 2 minutes. For those of you that wish to speak at public forum, please know you'll have your opportunity. It may be after the board meeting, but we would have to, and I want to say a better job, we would have to make certain that our public is informed that if they want to speak to an item on the agenda, they need to make certain that they have done so. That's what I got out of it, Mr. Young.
Well, and you're correct to point out that there are two different types of public comment. One that deals with a proposition before the board upon which the board will take action.
Right.
Two, public comment. And many districts have public comment at the end of the meeting so that it can go on as long as the board permits it. But if you have public comment at the front of the meeting, it needs to be distinguished from the comment of the public that deals with a proposition before the board. There needs to be two separate.
And we do not currently have that.
No, we don't. And to Mr. Adams' point, that would allow everyone to speak. If we set a certain amount of time at the beginning of the meeting, or even, I think the county commission doesn't start their meeting until after there's a comment portion where people sign up and there's a limited amount of time and then their meeting starts. But we could start calling that, there's a term used by some of the other districts. They don't call it public forum at that point.
Ones that I've seen are public participation.
Public participation, but
public
that first part is public comment on agenda, right?
Yes. Well, you don't have to do it that way, but
I mean, that would be a distinction. We could say
yes,
public comment on agenda items.
Yes.
Would be in this first.
Right, and there's a set of rules for that.
And then at the end of the meeting, public comment on any other item of interest to public for public education. We could sit here. That gives everybody the opportunity, Mr. Adams, to speak.
Now, there will be people who will object to having to sit through an entire board meeting before they can make their public comments.
We used to have, when I first got on the board, the public comment was at the end of the meeting.
It was when I was on the board in Leon County.
And we changed it because of length of time, I think. I don't really remember why it was changed, but it did get changed. Mr. Slayton.
It was changed because some of the board members felt like that some of the speakers would come right from work and then want to speak and go home. And they didn't want to stick around till, unfortunately, 10 or 11 o'clock, because if you remember some of our famous board members, board meetings, they lasted forever.
I would stay for those meetings.
Yes.
1 o'clock in the morning.
So, I'm for writing
I
this
was not on the
policy.
board.
I had a question.
Yes, sir.
The limit of 3 minutes, that's unshared, I mean, we're eliminating the shared minutes.
I don't think we can we eliminate, because it was one time we were told that we had to do that. There was a legislative protocol.
You
Nope.
do not have to allow donating
Oh,
time.
okay.
That's right. But it's the 3 minutes has only been in the last
Well, we
10
changed from
years.
2 minutes to 3 years, the request of a board member, I remember.
Yeah, and that's been
Was it
within the
me?
last 8 or 10 years, but
Well, I'm for 3
we won't.
minutes with no sharing, so.
And the one recommendation that I've made, and I've pretty consistently made, I have always been very uncomfortable with the language that allows the presiding officer to extend the time period. Not because there's anything inherently wrong with it, but because I think it creates the possibility of allegations that the chair is preferring certain speakers over others. You let this person go on for 5 minutes, but you wouldn't let me go on in the contrary manner.
I agree on that.
Okay,
So
now can I ask,
It's always bothered me.
recently, there's been an effort to enforce when you had to turn in your materials.
And I believe that is addressed in here. And
Well, you know, when I was chair, it was that it had to be turned in before we got to the consent agenda.
Right.
Mr. Fetzko's language is that it has to be turned in before we adopt
Adoption
the
of the agenda.
agenda.
And
Which
there's
is
been some
earlier.
consternation with that, because that is a pretty quick turnaround time.
Yeah.
Anybody who's running late is
Yeah.
likely not gonna be able to.
And I don't know that we've ever had it in policy. That was just the way I did it, and then he,
How is it, you just said you saw it in here? I
I
didn't.
believe that I did see something in here which says they have to register,
it says they will be recognized in the order they're registered.
I thought I
Right
saw
to stop in C, right there, must register their intention to participate upon their arrival at the meeting by completing the speaker's blah, 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 and indicating his or her representation. So you can change that.
Yeah, because that opens it up so whenever they show up, they can fill out the form.
Right.
And they have a tendency to encourage other people to get a form
Yes,
in the middle of the meeting
Right.
and bring it forward. I mean, we've had some that have gone from speakers of 20 people to 40 people during the speaking.
what about if you said attendees must register their intention to participate in the public portion of the meeting before the board is convened, or language to that effect?
I think that's exactly what it should be. The meetings always start at 5:30, and by 5:30, when the chairman says, call this meeting to order, that cuts off the speakers.
But we've had people, our process can't handle it. I mean, we only get
Yeah,
a
you're
few of
right.
those big
You're
meetings.
right.
Our
You're right.
process can't handle what you're saying.
That's right.
Why not?
Because they're
Because
lined
they
up to
back
fill out their
up.
forms and get them in.
Well,
yeah.
if they get here early enough to fill out their form, they walk
Well,
down, they turn
but
it
then it
in.
creates the problem of whether or not we have staff here that early to accommodate
Right.
the requests.
I think it's.
How early are you here, ma'am? But I mean,
But the problem is, we have no way of predicting when we are going to have lines out the door waiting to turn
Right.
in speakers.
oh, I think we do. We know when the hot topics are coming. You know, and if we have to change the setup, I'm sure the superintendent and then staff can talk about, is there other ways instead of bringing it all down front? Because by the time the meeting starts, there's no reason to be parading down front. Like I said, that.
I think that, I think
gonna
what,
go along with all
I can't
this.
speak for Mr. Adams, but I know that one meeting in particular where we were color coding, that was a very,
I'll make it easy. I'm gonna let y'all go with this. If y'all gonna try to limit speakers and all this stuff, I'm not gonna participate in that one. Okay?
well,
matter.
we're not trying to limit, we're trying to,
No, we're trying to make it more productive to the meeting.
According to you.
So
It's
if-
productive to hear from the citizens.
so if we,
Okay, you're hearing it from me.
and the citizens will get a chance to weigh in on all this at some point.
I'm
Yeah.
sticking with 3 minutes, and I'm not gonna limit how long we're gonna have.
Well, I don't
Do you
think there's a
mind-
question, I don't think there's a question now pending about the 3 minutes. What I hear
No.
now is the question about when must they
Right.
register? And how can they show up in the middle of a meeting and file a form and be given an opportunity to speak?
But we're not talking about that. We've had,
Yes,
Yeah,
we are.
Yeah, we are.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are.
We've moved on.
We're not talking about 3 minutes.
No,
3
no, no,
minutes
I'm
has
talking
been,
about what I heard discussion, okay, and maybe I'm wrong, is when people's lined up here trying to get their forms handed in.
right.
And the chair, which Mr. Fesca is the last one, say, okay, but by the time we get to the consent agenda, we gotta have all your paperwork done. They're still lined up.
He said adoption of agenda.
Adoption agenda, whichever one it is.
And
That's-
Mr. Slayton is proposing that if the form is not in when the gavel calls the meeting to order, it will not be accepted. So I think we've got to come to a consensus
Right.
of what is, and then we can have that discussion. I really like the idea of having comment prior to the meeting on agenda items, and then any public forum, any public comment about the state of education or whatever at the end.
Non-agenda items, public comment about non-agenda items.
Because the way it reads now,
Yeah, our current policy provides that.
members
it
of the,
says-
to make comments about education in the public school system is what the comments in public forum are supposed to be about.
Is that your policy or ours?
That is ours.
Okay.
Our
That
current
limits that.
policy on presentation of members,
Okay?
And it also provides that it shall happen prior to the adoption of the agenda. And so that's where we need to make sure that if we are going to have the public participation on non-agenda items, we need to make it clear that it is going to be at the end of the meeting, rather than before.
And if you decide to separate it that way, which I think is a good idea, then you can allow the sign-up for the non-agenda public forum section of the meeting to the end of the meeting.
yeah, because they might hear something they want to comment
Yeah.
on during the meeting.
But now the question that Mr. Slayton's proposal, and I hear Mr. Adams expressing some concern, is a cutoff at some point for comments, public comment about agenda items.
This is very interesting. I just want to bring this to the attention of us. Members of the public may also address the board in a public forum at the conclusion of its regularly scheduled board workshops. So it didn't say, that's the only one that it addresses as at the conclusion. So it would be easy enough to fix that, so.
That's
I
workshops.
know, but I mean, we could move that language that's already on here to regular meetings.
Board meetings.
Yep. Because it's kind of convoluted here.
You mean our
Because it
existing
doesn't say when it is for anything else. It just says it for the workshops.
Which creates the vagueness. I've looked at this policy, our
Yeah.
policy, so many different ways to see, people have asked me, can we do this, can we do that? And the conclusions that I've generally come up with are no, because we've got so many just bizarre competing concepts in other parts of the policy that we're kind of constrained to do one thing and one thing only.
I will say also that the majority of districts with which we work do not provide for public comment at workshops. Do not.
Yep.
The majority, vast majority. Workshops are not meetings where action is to be taken. The public has the right to sit through workshops and listen and prepare their comments based upon what they hear, so that when the subject comes before the board, they are prepared, having attended the workshop. But typically, majority of the public, of the school board meetings with our clients does not provide for public comment at workshops. Your call on that.
I can think back to when this started. I have been here, because it was the fact that we meet at different times. We have a 9 o'clock workshop, we have a 3 o'clock now workshop, and then we have the 5:30 meeting. It was an opportunity to let public that couldn't come at 5:30 be able to have access. But I see that point. I don't know what the rest of the board would think about cutting off public forum at our workshops.
I have no
I know where
problem.
Mr. Adams is. What did you say?
I have no problem with it,
Cutting it off or having it?
cutting it off.
Okay, okay. You don't have a problem with stopping comments at workshops? Okay.
As we make these comments, may I
Oh,
suggest?
Mr. Leonard, did you have something?
I just want to suggest something here. I suggest that as you make these comments and as there begins to develop a consensus, perhaps it would be helpful for your board attorney to try to characterize the changes that need to be made, because it's going to be pretty tough for us to wordsmith this as we go along. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I
Mr.
just wanted to
Superintendent.
make certain that, the way I read it, I'm not looking at it from a perspective of trying to limit anyone's opportunity from a public standpoint to be able to provide their opinions. I'm looking at it from two different perspectives. One, you want to make sure they have the opportunity, but more importantly for us, we have to do the people's business, which is what the actual agenda is about. And then also now, from another standpoint, thinking about staff members, and you could certainly limit the number of people that would have to be present for the public comment if it was provided at the end or if it was a limited period of time. So those were the two perspectives that we looked at this. So not trying to limit anybody's opportunity to come address you. I mean, they are citizens and have the opportunity and the right to do so.
Ms. Payne, I see you down there, barely.
Yellow bird.
The other thing I would say is that it's not about, when you have people coming down here at the front and they're lined up, it's like a classroom with kids coming in tardy. It's disruptive. So if you don't have a place for them, if it's in the outside, if it's a corner or wherever it is, if the meeting is still starting and they're still, it's not about limiting what they say, but the whole procedure looks very chaotic and disruptive. I've sat here and watched people line up, and these ladies, and you cannot help your voice. Sometimes it carries, so you can't hear. So for the people that have come to listen and to hear what's happening, you can't do that because there are people surrounding these ladies at the very front of the meeting, and they're on their knees, they're standing, they're over. Did you get this? They don't mean to be disruptive, but it's just naturally that way because there is no order. And so I think if nothing else, you have to decide what the order is going to look like, because the only example I can use is like a kid coming in tardy to class. I have to start teaching at this time. And so if 50 of you are coming off of a late bus or whatever, no pun intended, Mr. Dennis, but you have to have a procedure for that so that the reason we are meeting is done. We're here for the meeting, so we want to be able to do that. And otherwise, it just looks very chaotic and disruptive from my seat here.
I can tell you that other districts, virtually every district that I know of, has a sign up outside the door.
I was going to ask you about other ways, because, I mean, I think the county actually does it electronically, where you sign up on a pad outside, and then that's, but Mr. Dennis, you seem to have a comment?
You can't talk about a process without me wanting to weigh in. And one of the things that struck me as an enhancement, we talk about cutting things off, but we're concerned about the lineup and the people here. But I think what I heard in general was once the meeting starts, we don't want disruption.
Right.
So there's a reasonable expectation to not continue to conduct that part of the business once the meeting starts. To that end, the forms, whether it be electronic or other, for input for the agenda, we take them up at 5 o'clock. They're no longer available. And then those that were here and had intention to speak have the forms in hand, and we can manage them either by switching these ladies so they're over here off the side or in the back. But either way, you've curtailed that disruption, as the deputy brought up. The only thing that it doesn't address is I'm sitting in the audience, you're talking about an agenda, and I have an, oh, by the way, and I want to make a comment. That's gonna happen, but they still have the opportunity at the end of the meeting in a public forum to at least weigh in, although that may be after you've already taken action.
Well, I think that the chair does a good job of, you know, we'll have to come up with this procedure, but, yeah, I think we've gotten some good conversation, yeah, and it's 5 o'clock. And I think that we'll end with this. We'll